Hello, welcome everyone to a Keystone Contractor Association presented by the KCA Health KCA Mental Health Awareness Task Force. 2 years ago, during Mental Health Awareness Month, we hosted a series of videos and stories of hope and some testimonials. And one individual, Chris Linton, gave a powerful talk 2 years ago about his struggles, mental health struggles. And he called me a couple weeks ago and said he wanted to give an update on his past, his journey the past 2 years. So I'd like to welcome you to the Hard Hats and Healing, continuing the conversation on mental health in construction. Chris is going to provide some opening comments, and then we'll open the floor for questions. You can ask those questions by raising your hand or dropping it in the chat, however you feel comfortable. But without further ado, Construction Executive Chris Linton will take the floor now, and looking forward to hearing your comments, Chris. Great
Yeah,
seeing you again.
yeah. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. It's good to be back with you guys. I want to just give a sort of a brief update on where things are now, and then probably just go right into questions. So it should be a fairly short meeting. But okay, so hello again, friends from the KCA. My name is Christopher Linton. I gave the first KCA talk about anxiety and depression at about this time 2 years ago. I want to talk about what it is like to suffer with these conditions and talk about what the last 2 years have been like as I've been going through a recovery. For most of my life, I've had severe clinical anxiety and depression. Since 2008, I've been hospitalized several times. That may sound extreme, but that is an indicator of how bad my circumstances and condition have become. I feel like everybody has their breaking point, and I had reached mine repeatedly a number of times. My condition first surfaced uh, with severity in 2008 during the economic freefall that most of you would recall. Because of multiple circumstances, I lost a tremendous amount of money. I lost the company that I'd built over 16 years. I lost a sense of security with me and my family. And, obviously uh, I felt like a failure at that business. But I realized that the most damaging aspects of that whole experience was that I lost basically my identity. I was so wrapped up in building the business and pushing it forward, growing it, um, and I believed that I could never fail. Um, but those circumstances, outside circumstances, mostly, led to that issue. Um, so yeah, the business had become all consuming and the primary focus of my life. So at that time, I was taken down so low with the stress that I had my first um, hospitalization, and that was a self-admitted hospitalization, and I was on medications at the same time, but the anxiety just and depression got to be too much. And then it took several months, and by several, I probably mean maybe 4 or 5, even 6 months to get back where I feel like I was back in the game again. Um, so I'm just trying to catch up. So I was at that time I founded another company and went on for about 10, 12 years. And that was really great, designing and building many commercial projects, primarily in the brewing business. So I was able to tie in with that big explosion of breweries. And it was particularly great because I was doing a lot of design work and I love the design. So I would take a project from just the concept to completion, sometimes help choose a building, more often doing all the interior design and subbing everything out. So I was happy with most of all of that. Some exceptions that come from the regular stress of building things. And I was able to mostly manage my natural stress that comes with that business. Um, Eventually, some more very challenging situations took over, and I kind of spiraled again with anxiety. In fall of 23, I had ECT treatments, which is a treatment for depression primarily, and it's a very effective treatment. And I'm not sure exactly how it works, but essentially they put you under full anesthesia. They introduce an electric shock, and it causes a seizure. And they find that seizure activity um, basically erases the neural pathways that have been established that lead to depression. But they say it doesn't really do anything for anxiety. If we recall, depression and anxiety work together, um, which makes it that much more difficult. And, anecdotally, you can find somebody that's really suffering with depression, suffering with anxiety, and um, it could be either, or sometimes it'll kind of ping pong back and forth between them. So, um, so I was, because of that anxiety, I was readmitted in December of 2023. So I just want to give you some of the statistics, because we're seeing an increase in the cases, and as far as the stigma, just it's becoming a lot more understood and known, or at least brought out of the darkness, so to speak. So in the U.S., reported depression cases alone have risen for adults 60% since 2014. The World Health Organization estimates the conditions cost about 12 billion lost working days, and the cost of the global economy is about $1 trillion annually. So in the U.S., it's estimated that depression alone costs employers about $187 billion, with $48 billion of that from absenteeism. The other $140 billion comes from healthcare costs. This is actually a low number because, as we know, a lot of sufferers don't pursue medical intervention. So the statistics are still dramatic. The CDC reports that depression for women is 16%, while men is 10%. There are about 42 million adults that suffer from anxiety, and 22.5 million that suffer from depression. So that translates to 1 in 5 adults with anxiety, and 1 in 8 with at 12 and over suffering from depression. The stats for teens from age 12 to 19 has increased to 19%. It's also much higher than adolescent girls at 26.5%. I realize this is a lot of numbers, but we're trying to establish that there's been an increase, and it's a real it's a growing issue, and that should really speak to where we are in our field, that we know that out there with the people that are on staff, that there's going to be increased numbers. So yeah, the adolescent girls at 26.5% compared to adolescent males at 12%. So this group faces increased mix of developmental, social, economic risks that increase vulnerability. It's also speculated that the increase of the use of social media and online bullying are a significant contributor to the increased statistics. And, we didn't have that when any of us were in school, but with adolescents, teenagers being so susceptible, you go to social media and it's always showing how great your life is, and, boyfriends and all this stuff. And it's all positive things for them. But for people that are looking at it, they tend to compare their lives, and causes anxiety. So they're showing 88,000 people in the U.S. die from anxiety and depression, and that would be through suicide. But in contrast, with cancer, it's about 626,000 people. It's huge, but cancer, you die, quote unquote, of natural causes. 88,000 people that die of suicide is another daunting statistic. So anyway, going back just a little bit, the largest increase was for teenagers, and their increase of anxiety was 61%, and the increase of depression was 45%. So there's dramatic increases establishing here. The other thing is that it's kind of like a concussion. When you've suffered one, you're more likely to suffer again. So the threshold to have a reoccurrence of it is fairly low, especially once you suffer the first time. Um, so the stigma, and we talked about this before, and it's changed somewhat, but the stigma of mental health issues in general persists. But in the last 2 years, the condition has been brought more into the mainstream and better recognized as the serious condition that it is. While there has been a significant shift in the normalization of anxiety and depression in the media, there's still a long way to go to better understanding. Just a decade ago, the conditions were rarely spoken of, and sufferers um, and others rarely brought it up. Being judged and diminished was a real likelihood. Then and now, many outside of the medical profession, may consider it to be a self-inflicted condition. And I found that myself, unlike any other medical condition, which is what it is, just because it's mental, people feel like you should be doing something different, or you bring it on yourself, and that's absolutely not the case. But it's hard for people to understand that. So in my case, and establishing it here, and most others, supporters usually get to the point where they feel that it's something that we can control and that we bring it on ourselves. The stigma is enhanced by the idea that personal weakness, selfishness, avoidance, and a need for attention even create the condition. So this perception makes it worse, because then we also feel like we feel guilty for suffering. And that is just another component that adds to the difficulty. Um, so things are slowly changing, and that's the good news. Um, People that are suffering now in our trade and others, maybe they see the commercials, and maybe they see online advertisements for medication. So it's bringing some awareness to it. Medications are more prevalent in the workplace, and some employers are accepting the significance of the problem. School staff, certainly for teens, are much more likely to be looking for the students who show symptoms. And the workplace, it cannot be ignored that anxiety and depression are now more significant issues, and quite substantially, because it's becoming more of awareness, and the stigma is diminishing somewhat. So they're particularly hard to understand because both occur on a spectrum of severity, symptoms, and duration. So it's different for everybody, and that makes it very difficult to diagnose and to treat. Unlike, let's say, cancer or something where they can see it, they can test blood, etc. It's something that is just a lot more difficult because of it varies from person to person. Um, so, and this is true particularly. Sorry, I got some heavy machinery in the background. Um, this is true particularly because often the sufferer is unable to explain how they actually feel, and they may never disclose how they are feeling. For the duration of the depression, we usually think in terms of weeks and months, and not the passing depression state that we may quickly rebound from. And there's a big difference between what people recognize as, being down and, being depressed about some negative event that happens in your life. This is a completely different condition entirely. So there are a few conditions where the sufferer has to basically self-diagnose. And what's happening is you might go to a professional, let's say a psychiatrist, who's going to prescribe medications for you. And you have to describe, and it's very subjective. And often they'll say, well, tell us on a 1 to 10 scale how much you're depressed or how much your anxiety is. And we don't really have anything to relate that to. So it's awfully hard to even give an accurate number. So we also don't have a consistent language that explains the many symptoms we might be feeling, and varied frequency and severity. Often people say, well, it's pain. Well, it's not pain. I went over that in the last talk. It's not. It's a whole series of real significant uh, symptoms, right? So just moving on here. Um, it's what's going on is the chemicals that are already in your mind, fight or flight mode, particularly that's with anxiety. Your mind is trying to address problems, and it just starts spinning around with the only tools that it has. Um, and those tools are just natural responses, fight and flight or depression, and it just takes over, and it's like a switch that goes on and doesn't shut off. Um, so anyway, um, the symptoms in general, which I went over in more detail prior, was it makes it almost impossible to see hope and really register positive change and see opportunities and just the ability to do. Anybody that's familiar with this or heard others, it's just the most simple things, whether it's brushing your teeth or eating, can sometimes just feel impossible. Um, so it's not being able to understand or imagine how you once, with intention, functioned as a normal person. So it's the hopelessness, the loneliness, the helplessness, shame, envy, and feeling left behind, basically, because you're not able to move forward like most people are. So when it comes to my 2-year journey, it's really been a series of steps forward and some steps back, and a lot of that's produced by the conditions around us. So, like I've been going through a divorce, which is a major impact, and that has circumstances attached to it, like issues with communication with my children and friends and even neighbors. So that's a big life change that I've had to deal with. And another one was during that time, really because of the emotional impact, it was extremely hard to work. Work was hard to find. So I have that issue too. And being self-employed, being able to integrate back into the professional world is a bit of a challenge, to say the least. Um, so I've had, as bad as it's gotten, I mean, I'm reticent to say, but I've had two suicide attempts through medication. And, it's hard for me to admit that, but I'm illustrating it because it gets that hard. Like it really gets that hopeless at times. Um, so without getting too much into details of all the different circumstances, like having to sell my home and issues with my truck, and it's just like one thing on top of another. When it rains, it pours. Um, but all those triggers also occur on a varying spectrum of severity. And I think that the changes of your circumstances is the most important aspect that can trigger the condition. So when things are going good, or there's good things, hey, I just got a raise at work, or work has gotten easier. So those things really contribute to a better state of mind. It really feels like we're just much more sensitive to what's going on around us. So, yeah, I say like the state of mind because, in fact, the subconscious mind is acting on its own agency and it releases those chemicals. And so, for that reason, the input that we're getting from the outside world is huge. And obviously, that speaks to having people that can be supportive and recognizing that it can be difficult for them. Um, so it's incremental steps forward is what it is. And you finally get to the point where, okay, I'm feeling a bit better. I can do some minor things. Um, like, okay, it might be brushing your teeth, but eventually you get to the point of being able to shower on a regular basis or apply for jobs or trying to repair relationships. Um, and I found that filling the mind with affirmations as much as possible is really, really important too. And, kind of giving yourself as much positive components as you can, recognizing positive things in your life, even taking stock and gratitude of what you do have. And the last thing I wanted to say is it was important for me that faith, and I'm not going to get into too much detail of that right now, but faith is really important, and certainly for me personally, um, sometimes it feels like that's the only place you can go, and I've experienced some pretty significant positive things that happened in my life that felt like they were blessings, and that's been great. Um, Again, that's a whole different subject to get into, but um, yeah, it can be a significant part of sort of a multi-pronged approach. And I mean, the last thing I wanted to say was going back to medications, and I think I established this last time. It feels like uh, when you're all the way down with the hopelessness and feeling helpless, getting medications, they treat the symptoms and not the core problem. But you need those to get a leg up. You need them to get to a place where you can start feeling better and start implementing change and trying to let the mind heal itself. So the medications absolutely have a role. The mind does want to heal itself, um, but it's important, to get professional help to try to get through that place where you can start getting some legs up. So anyway, that kind of completes what I wanted to say here. And then, John, if you have any questions or anybody else has any questions, we can try to get those answered to the best of my ability.
Yeah. First off, thanks again. It takes strength, to share your story. Thank you. You did that 2 years ago and did it now. That's awesome. We were appreciative and learn from each other, obviously. But looking back, when you recorded your first KCA video 2 years ago, where were you mentally and emotionally compared to where you are today?
Well, I mean, really, I was doing well. I had, I felt like I had been um, mostly recovered, and honestly, I was feeling like I was in a place where things were going to be okay. I still had difficult circumstances. I mean, in reality, that was the beginning of the divorce, and I had some projects for my company. But yeah, in general, and sometimes you can't really explain how you get from one place to another. It's just it's an internal thing with your mind, but it's also certainly outside circumstances. Now honestly, I've taken a job doing project management, and it's been stressful. The ramping up and the learning curve has been tough, and it's just something that started in the last 2 weeks. And a big component of this is trying not to look forward and see problems in the future. Try to stay in the present, and like they always say, one day at a time, effectively.
Yeah. I've I've jotted down a few questions, but I don't know if anyone from the crowd has any. I know a few people unmuted. Christina, fire away.
Hi, my name is Christina Gruzes. I work at Pro A. Thank you guys for having me today. Chris, it's not really a question, but I just wanted to say that you are such a powerful person. I had to write some things down. I love how you mentioned what's going on in the brain, what's happening, and I think that's so important to understand what's going on in our bodies. And because oftentimes we put a lot of that blame on ourselves, right? And I love the importance of self-talk, gratitude, faith, and different pathways of your own mental health recovery. I thought that that was amazing, without pushing it onto people. I absolutely love your story, and thank you so much for sharing it. You don't know how much you helped so many people today. Thank you.
Yeah, Christine, I just want to comment to that briefly. I want to thank you for that. I really do, because I don't think I'm particularly different from other people that suffer. Maybe the only difference is that, like the last talk, I try to put some sort of language to it. And again, I was like, well, people suffer and they say, oh, but he's in pain, but it's not that. It's not pain as we know it. So we're even giving a false label to it without any definition. It's one thing to say, oh, I have cancer. Okay, well, define where it is. This is defining it with so many different symptoms. So anyway, thank you for that comment, and obviously recognize the thought process and affirmations and the treatment, so to speak, is everything. I mean, it's very, very. There's many different ways to treat it, and all of them have to be in place in my mind.
Yeah, and you putting the language to that, I feel like so many people could relate to the things that you're saying and
Right.
the way that you speak about it and the way that you speak about yourself. So this was just so amazing. I'm so happy that I came here. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I echo Christina, and again, it does take a lot of strength to come in here and share your story. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
A few others unmuted. I have some questions, but if the unmuted want to ask a question, let me know. So we are a construction association here, and we bill. 2 years ago, your seminar as a construction executive shares a story, and we build today as a construction executive, provides his update. So, as a construction leader, how has your experience with depression, anxiety, and mental health challenges, how has it changed your leadership style and the way that you approach the industry?
Well, I'm more conscious of it for sure. I can't say that, like with the company that I'm working now, they don't have an initiative, and you're sort of, well, you're not sort of, but you're definitely on your own, uh, so to speak. But I recognize that when the challenges come up, where most people say, "Hey, I'm a challenge. I'm in the challenge." In my case, like starting at the beginning with using computers and um, whatever it might be, it gets down to that basic level, and having people to support you and say, "Hey, let's walk through this, one at a time, one issue at a time." But as far as a leadership role, um, honestly, there's not too much you can do, except if you see somebody that seems to be struggling, but and reach out to them and try to guide them to get help, get them to a threshold. But it's hard to say that I can take a leadership role of some sort with the condition. Last thing I'll say, if somebody says they're struggling, it is helpful to have experience with it and say, I get it, and there's certainly more people out there that I've heard of that can use a sympathetic ear.
Definitely.
John, if I could jump on. So Bill
Sure.
Ellis from the Partnership for Drug-Free New Jersey. So I've been working with John, and our role is prevention. So how do we prevent things from going on? So Chris, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
Was on a webinar, and they were talking. We had a nutritionist talking about the need to eat healthy, that when people are hungry, people are vulnerable, and then getting outside, exercising, and then maybe just share. We had a rainy Memorial Day weekend. I'm interested to how you got through that from a mental health perspective.
Yeah, well, you're touching on good points. Is that small things, are really important, and seriously, they go into, hey, count any win you can, even if it is getting up, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, getting something to eat, and if you don't feel like making a 3 egg omelet, uh, try to have a piece of toast, and a bagel, and that sounds extreme, but that's really what the condition is like. Um, Going through, the weekend weather was a disappointment, and it didn't really affect me all that much, honestly. Um, but I can see how some people would take that. Oh, I had plans and I was trying to do something, and it can, like, small things like that can make you kind of spiral. But those things, I believe, are more temporary. What I'm talking about is, more extreme life changes that could really, send you spinning and might last as an impact for weeks or months, whereas most people rebound pretty quickly. So that's how it's different. But the things you mentioned, like eating or trying to get some exercise, they become so unbelievably difficult that they seem impossible. So I think that kind of addresses it. But those things,
Yeah.
Right. And that just, John, finishing up. So for me, drug and alcohol prevention, just a good example. We had bad weather. I would imagine a lot of unhealthy use of alcohol and other drugs, like, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. Like that is so much of American society. And those that have some sort of problem, I would argue, Thursday or Friday when they knew the bad weather was coming. Oh, I'm going to do this. Even getting to the movies, Project Mary, I thought was a good movie. So a friend and I went there, and that was a great uplifting movie. But that's what I'm saying. From the prevention aspect, when people are down and out, that's when they are most vulnerable. That's when they need people who care. And just like Chris said, they need people who understand and just need to not fix things, just listen and be there.
yeah, yeah. And to comment briefly on that, I'm looking at that weather, and you can imagine the people down on the shore. What are they doing? Playing cards and drinking, basically. Oh, we can't go, and that's what happens. And to speak more largely to our community, everybody knows that people in the trades, quite a few, are recovering. And I've seen that with my subs and people around me, and they've gotten to a point where they were just drinking too much, and it's kind of a lifestyle for a lot of people in the trades in particular. So that should make us more conscious of it, because that's a gateway. I don't drink, I don't smoke, certainly don't take any drugs, and that's the baseline of where you have to be to try to pursue reasonable recovery.
Agree. I don't want to rush you, Bill. Anything else?
No, he covered what I wanted to cover. Thanks.
That's good. Christina, I see a hand up. Is that the same hand or?
No, this is a different
Okay.
one. So
Perfect.
I wanted to ask Chris, how do you deal with more so like the littler things that might kind of get you spiraling, the day-to-day things where you just feel overwhelmed? How do you deal with that now?
I mean, I think the way to do it is try to instill whatever positives you can find. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's like registering a win. Hey, I brushed my teeth. Yesterday, I had a very stressful day. I'm trying to learn everything, and I feel like their expectations are just way more than what's possible. And then I'm driving home. I look away for a second, and I, bump the bumper of a car in front of me. I'm like, really, it rains, it pours kind of thing. And then I think it through. Well, it's a small insurance claim. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. I haven't been in an accident in a very long time. And I know these things happen. Like I was stressed out about how am I going to get on this call through my laptop. It turns out it didn't work. I I couldn't get Wi-Fi. I have my iPhone. There's a network here, and none of them connected. And okay, I got to put like, all right, well, I'm still going to get through this somehow, and you encounter this adversity, and you just do your best to not let it pull you into a spiral, so to speak, or a whirl. But it's hard because it's like a little bit of icing on this cake. Your foundation is very sensitive.
Yeah. And how do you like trick your brain? You were saying on like the days where kind of these things that are good for you kind of feel impossible, right? So like,
Yeah.
how do you trick your brain to kind of get that starting for you?
You really have to do the best you can, and as and trying to just register any small win. I can say this morning I was okay. I got up, I brushed my teeth. I got up and I took a shower, and I made something to eat. Now I'm not at the depths of it right now, thank God. But with the stressors that have going on that are already mentioned, I'm very concerned about spiraling. And you take some medication too. The doctors will prescribe something and says, all right, this will help take the edge off, and it'll help give you a better perspective. Like after that little fender bumper, I was like, well, it's not that big, and the damage to his car, thank God, was very minimal, and it's not something that I essentially need to put on my plate. It's not something that I need to handle. You turn it over to insurance. So the rationalization through it is really important. And being self-aware is a huge thing. Being aware of the emotions that you're going through and trying to manage it, that comes first. Is saying, hey, I'm feeling stressed about this. I'm feeling stressed about my job. I'm feeling stressed about the fact that I just had a fender bender. And you got to start there and then kind of rationalize your way through it. And I hope that's answering your question. Say, wait a second, is this the end of the world? Am I going to get through it? Have I been through worse? Yeah, I've absolutely been through worse. So it's a constant reminder. It's a constant reminder that, this is not, somehow I'm going to breathe tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
I've heard the word stress quite a few times today. That's to be expected. Construction is a very stressful industry. We're on timelines, budgets, owner demands, very stressful. When you see a younger professional who seems stressed out, kind of overwhelmed, everything's going on, while the industry's come a long way and people can speak up now, I feel like a lot of people still maybe not speak up. And when you see that young professional that looks overwhelmed, what advice would you give them, and how would you approach them?
Try to find a community of people, because you feel so isolated. You feel like you're the only one that's happening to. So having people that you can reach out to, whether it's through support groups or therapy, or friends, maybe through church or otherwise. Sometimes just communicating with somebody can make you feel less isolated, make you feel less alone in it. And then on the other side of that, John, is you're thinking, I don't want to put anything on anybody else. I don't want to put this constant condition on your wife or your spouse, and then people end up like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. They end up going to the bar, but because that absolutely, that calms it down for a period of time. I've experienced that myself years ago, but obviously that's not a healthy way of dealing with it.
Correct. I jotted down about 20 questions, and you kind of hit most of them. I have one more, but before I get to that, I want to ask the crowd here. Any questions? I see a few just unmuted. Any? Was that an unmute by accident?
Okay. So, John,
yep.
Just that what Chris just said, the data is clear. You have the therapist, you have the people in recovery, the hospital, but what keeps people healthy and sober is seeing other people doing okay with your particular disease. So the data is, I was at a webinar, a conference a month ago, and all the people who are therapists, look, you guys have important roles to play, but seeing somebody, oh, I can be like that. I can have a good day. I can have, so Chris is right on point. The data on seeing other people and seeing them like you, I can be like that person is so critical.
Yep.
It was a John?
Bill.
Your name? I'm sorry.
Bill.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Bill. No, I know the other John. No, you're completely right. And at the beginning stages of this, again, you don't have a language to explain it. So if you have somebody else who says, man, I've been through it, and they tell you, well, I just feel so hopeless. And I've heard this, I'm in a well and there's a little sliver of light and I can't get a foothold, there's nobody up there to help me. That sense of isolation, often when people are suffering, particularly with depression, that's what it feels like. So if somebody can explain to you and say, hey, I've been there and I've had, times of amazing recovery and blessings in my life that I can't explain, that is a language that people need to hear.
Agree. Any other questions? I have one more here. As we wrap up Mental Health Awareness Month, what gives you hope when you look at the future of mental health in our industry?
Well, I mean, I would say that pretty significantly the stigma is dropping. And strangely, it has to do with the medications. There's a whole bunch of new medications coming out. And, just since my last talk, you haven't seen, back then you didn't really see that much. Now there's, kind of one thing after another. And so it's being driven by the commercialism of trying to prescribe medications. A side benefit is that, hey, you might be feeling this, and maybe our medication can help. So that and a general awareness, it's moved a couple of stages towards being understood as something that people do not control.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well stated. Any other questions? I just want to say on. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Not me. No, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. Thought I heard something. I thought this was awesome. Very powerful. Great messages. A lot of positive comments out there, and talk about community and hope for the industry and advice for younger professionals. I love it. All good stuff here. But yeah, on behalf of the KCA and on behalf of our audience today, I just want to thank you for spending some time with us and updating us on your story. And we want to stay in touch. Hopefully we see you June 8th at the construction celebration. You haven't made it in a couple years, so
Right.
hopefully you make this year. So we'll save a ticket for you. You have a name badge at the door waiting for you. So let me know if you can make it.
Thanks for that, John.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. See you later, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, especially Chris.
Yeah.